start this conversation with the first conversation I ever had with you. And I think it was around the idea of luminescence and one commune. But what stood out in that conversation to me was this process you went through during the pandemic, talking to people who disagreed with you based off of a social media post. And I want to start there. Can you explain to us what that process looked like so we can fill everybody in? And can you explain what you learned in that? And I think what happened from that is it brought you to even writing this book. So let's start there.
Yeah. Okay. So we have to all go back to March 2020 and put ourselves in that mindset. We were anchoring into port lockdown. There was a tremendous amount of uncertainty, a tremendous amount of fear. Obviously, the media channels were flooded with sensationalism and people were extremely triggered. And my wonderful dear partner, I call him my brother from another mother, Jacob, who you know, he urged me to begin writing a weekly newsletter that was dubiously named Commusings. And so I started writing this 1,500 to 2,000 word column every Sunday and deploying it to about 1.2 million people, and had the questionable idea of attaching my personal email to that missive. And of course, about three or so
that was brave.
Yeah. So the idea was, okay, in this soup of uncertainty, I was going to write these missives as little, buoys of hope to navigate the choppy seas of COVID, right? And it was like a service. It was people were feeling lonely. They wanted a sense of connection. And so that was the intention. But about 3 or 4 weeks in, I got myself over a bit of a literary barrel, having to produce that much content every week. And, fortunately for me, 2020 provided plenty of compost, I suppose, in terms of incendiary issues to excavate and to write about. And I was tackling them head on. I mean, certainly COVID, the development of the vaccine, the murder of George Floyd, and the subsequent reckoning for social justice, kind of the emanations from Trumpistan and the emergence of QAnon. And there was just so much going on. And I was really trying to take the middle path, as per my spiritual tradition, and write kind of rigorously researched, sane, middle ground essays to sort of get to help ground people, really. But of course, over 2,000 words, and tackling these incendiary issues, you're bound to offend someone. Yeah. And given that my email was attached to them, people did not hesitate for 1 second to let me know when I did offend them. And so Monday morning, I'd open my email and sort of the wave of opprobrium would crest to the bow of the inbox of my email. And many of the responses that I got were kind and encouraging, but I probably got 200 emails a week from people that strongly disagreed with something that I had said or I had written. And, I think we may have talked about this offline at some point, but I was a perpetual people pleaser growing up. Mm-hmm. And, receiving all of this recrimination, I initially took it very, very personally, and I was very defensive. And I would stay up at night kind of brooding over clever rejoinders. And, oh, man, I'm going to hold that ember and I'm going to throw it at them in the morning. And, of course, I, realized that I was getting burned that whole time. So over those first few months, I built what I called my psychological immune system. So very similarly to how we build our physiological immune system, which is through exposure to insult, through pathogens and bacteria and viruses, et cetera, such that, our wonderful adaptive immune system spins up these proteins and then finds the right one. We call them antibodies. And then we have this memory to spin them up when we run into that insult again. And very similarly, kind of metaphorically, I built my psychological immune system where just the right amount of exposure to insult, I started to become very stoic and sort of unflappable in response to a lot of insult and recrimination. And so as I began to center myself and develop these emotional regulatory tools, I started to engage with my detractors, and I would email them back and I'd say like, hey, listen, what about this nuance? And the more thoughtful ones, we would exchange maybe a volley of 3 or 4 emails. And then I would say, hey, why don't we just jump on a Zoom call? And this is sometimes what I call my great David Copperfield routine, because I made most people disappear at this juncture. I was like,
Which is
yeah, and you're gone.
Well, yeah, I mean, that onto itself is very telling of this time that we're in right now. And I want you to finish the story, but then I want to come back to that, because I really do think this idea of these modern conveniences destroying us. One of them is we can just cancel you, we can just ghost you, and that's now become socially acceptable.
100%. I mean, if you think about public discourse right now, it's largely being waged anonymously through digital warriorship behind screens. It's not that we didn't have conflict on the Serengeti, right, when we were living in tribes of 70 or 80, but how did we solve those? We actually had to come face to face and recognize each other's common humanity and compromise and find common ground, et cetera. But the way that we communicate now, through kind of the ease and convenience of the internet, is not at all profitable for common ground and compromise and solution or cooperation. So 26 brave souls took me up on my offer of having a Zoom call. And so I scheduled across the course of August and September 2020 on Monday and Tuesday afternoons, hour-long slots for these Zoom calls. And, my detractors were from all sides of the political spectrum. It wasn't one, avatar. It was everything. It was like, a white man should not center himself in the conversation about race at this moment. Like, okay, I hear you, except I'm also just writing a weekly column, or, and it was coming from all sides. Somehow I was both a conspiracist and a shill for Pfizer at the same time. I'm like, that's not possible. Neither of us. God. So I was writing articles like in August of 2020, I'll just ground it in an example. There was enough data to suggest that the people that were contracting COVID most severely, that was resulting in either hospitalization or unfortunately fatality, tended to be those people with multiple comorbidities, with high rates of obesity and diabetes. And that data was pretty convincing relatively early on. So I spent 100 hours collecting all of that data and then essentially trying to write a thoughtful 2,000 word essay on that topic.
I want to tell you for a second, I wish I had known you during that time, because I was doing the same thing. My husband and I spent about 20 to 40 hours a week just going through the data, looking at what was going on. And by August of 2020, we were like, metabolic health. There's a metabolic health problem. There's a vitamin D problem. And but instead of writing a blog, I took it to YouTube, which then properly got censored by big pharma, however you want to look at that. So, but I just want to say, I wish I had known you, because we were trying to figure out the same thing of like, what's the underlying cause here? So.
Yeah. And, if we go back to that time, there was also a contemporaneous body positivity movement that was very, very strong at that juncture.
Well said.
And I had written voluminously about my own weight struggles. I was a very, very chubby kid, obviously have tremendous compassion and empathy for those who have, struggled with weight over their life, because I am one of them. But that didn't inure me from people's offense or recrimination. And so, a lot of people were really insulted that I had essentially connected the severe contraction of COVID with obesity. And so I had a whole series of calls with mostly women, candidly, about that issue, essentially people that felt that I had shamed them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, but what was really, really interesting is that once we actually got into these Zoom calls, the whole tenor of the exchange changed. So first of all, you remember we weren't as fluent with Zoom back in those days. So there was a lot of like jabbing at buttons, and that was that just in itself was humanizing, right?
Yeah.
And then there would be the exchange of pleasantries. But it was so funny, Mindy. It's like these conversations took on almost the exact same pattern, one after the other, which was for 45 minutes, I just sat there and said nothing. And people just gish galloped their entire life story to me, like the problems that they were having in their relationships, a pet that they had lost, you know, issues that they were having with their kids, you know. Most of the time, we actually never got around to the issue that had put us initially at loggerheads. It was really, I was just creating a platform or a container, I guess I would say, for people to be seen and to be heard.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't have any training in nonviolent communication at that juncture. Subsequently, then I got very interested in it and I started, you know, studying Marshall Goldberg, who wrote he has a whole technique on nonviolent communication. But I was just kind of learning as I went. And as I went, I was able really to develop a regimen or a technique, a protocol for having profitable, productive, stressful conversations.
Amazing.